Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A heartfelt welcome to the press conference after the session of the Monetary Policy Council, with the participation of Professor Adam Glapiński, the head of the MPC and the Governor of the National Bank of Poland, and the members of the MPC, Professor Jerzy Kropiwnicki, Professor Jerzy Zyrzyński. Over to you, Professor. Information from the meeting of the Monetary Policy Council held on the 8th and 9th of January 2019. The Council decided to keep the NBP interest rates unchanged at reference rate at 1.5%, lombard rate at 2.5%, deposit rate at 0.5%, rediscount rate at 1.75%. Global economic conditions remain favorable, although incoming data suggests a weakening in some economies. In the euro area, following a decline in GDP growth in Q3 2018, certain economic climate indicators deteriorated further. In the United States, economic conditions remained very strong in Q4 2018, yet forecasts suggest lower growth in 2019. Also in China, activity growth is gradually slowing down. The continuously heightened uncertainty about the global economic outlook is having an adverse effect on the prices of some assets in the international financial markets. At the same time, global oil prices have fallen in recent months. A marked decline in commodity prices, notably the prices of oil, has contributed to lower inflation in many countries. At the same time, core inflation in the environment of the Polish economy, including the euro area, remains moderate. The European Central Bank keeps interest rates close to zero, including the deposit rate below zero. At the same time, the ECB has terminated the net purchase of financial assets, yet it will continue to reinvest the funds from the maturing securities. The U.S. Federal Reserve raised interest rates in December 2018. In Poland, incoming data point to economic conditions remaining strong. GDP growth is still driven by rising, albeit at a slightly lower rate in the previous quarter's consumption, which is fueled by increasing employment and wages, as well as very high consumer sentiment. This is accompanied by a rise in investment. Notwithstanding relatively high economic growth and wages rising faster than the previous year, annual consumer price growth has declined in recent months and remains moderate. At the same time, inflation net of food and energy prices continues to be low. In the Council's assessment, current information points to a relatively favorable outlook for economic conditions in Poland, although a gradual slowing in GDP growth is expected in the quarters ahead. At the same time, according to current forecasts, the annual price growth will increase in the coming years. Yes, due to the decline in oil prices and the freeze on electricity prices, the scale of this increase will be smaller than anticipated in the November projection. In the medium term, the expected slowdown in economic growth will have a dampening effect on inflation. Consequently, in the monetary policy transmission horizon, inflation will remain close to the target. The Council judges that the current level of interest rates is conducive to keeping the Polish economy on a sustainable growth path and maintaining macroeconomic stability. Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor. Ladies and gentlemen, please, you can please ask your questions now. Mr. Tuszyński, Rafał Tuszyński, Polish Radio Economic Office. First of all, I'd like to ask you about inflationary prospects. This is probably the most key fragment of the message. You are expecting that the price dynamics will be growing in the next months, yet the dynamics will not be as high as in the November projection. This is first of all determined by the energy prices. Yes. And to what extent lower will it be, the inflation path, as compared to the November projection? Because it was forecast at 3.2%. Yes, these two elements that I've indicated, the price in oil prices have declined and they are remaining at a lower level. They are not dropping any further, which we analyzed at length yesterday during the MPC session. They have declined significantly, probably since December 28th. They have been at roughly the same level, slightly growing. We're talking about the global prices. And electricity. As you will remember, when I presented the November projection, the staff were saying that we took into account the least favorable for the inflation scenario, and we assumed a relatively high, the highest possible energy price growth, although we were aware of the fact that the government would take some measures to avoid this growth or a growth at such a level, but we wanted to forecast the worst case scenario. It hasn't surfaced in the media, but at the end of the day, we know that the government, having taken the decisions regarding the excise tax and the price for end consumers will not change altogether, and this has radically changed the projection. These two elements combined, and the inflation is way lower, and so much lower that we are definitely not exceeding the inflationary target. I'd like to say that I'm part of the pessimistic wing of the MPC, and I've been observing with some concern what has been going on in the global oil markets, which indeed, as the governor has said, its price has radically decreased between November and December last year. However, towards the end of last year, it started to grow at a rate of roughly 2% per day, which might trigger the fact that towards the end of this year, in the global market, if this growth rate should be maintained, we might be facing a certain problem, so much so that those countries which constitute the hardcore of the OPEC will only be happy when the price is achieved towards $90 per barrel. Not because their production costs are so high, because the production costs in that region range from $10 to $30 per barrel. It's just because oil constitutes their main source of budgetary income, which is supposed to cover all the expenditure. Saudi Arabia is determined to get transformed into a modern country based on totally different sources of the revenues. The other countries also want to follow suit, and if you take a look at which prices would be satisfactory to them, it turns out that Saudi Arabia would need a price of roughly $98 per barrel, given the current prices, to maintain this, given the maintenance of the current social cultural policies to balance it somehow, which does not mean the fact that, as regards the ultimate conclusion in the area we've been analyzing, we're analyzing our future and the ensuing decisions. There are no differences among us. I also believe that in the course of the next year, the prices will be maintained within the inflationary target, and there will be no need to intervene. However, I'll be taking a close look at the process as well as its aftermath, and my colleagues have, by the way, been accustomed to the fact that I always take a close look at this, and another thing that has not only been involving me but also getting on my nerves is not only that there is some salary pressure. It's quite natural, in my opinion. There have been no major movements in this respect as regards wages and salaries in Poland. You could see that it did not follow the price productivity for a number of years, and at a given moment, given so dynamic an economic growth and so low an inflation rate, it has to trigger the natural expectations from the workforce, and there is the highest trade unionization occurs in the public sphere, so that's the case. You will remember that I started my public career as a trade unionist, and I have not given up all those sympathies, but what is actually getting on my nerves is that, I have been prosecuted back in my days for fighting for a right to a legal strike in Poland, but not for the right of cheating with the help of sick leaves and teaching my grandchildren how to cheat on people by teachers who take bogus sick notes. That's the boundary, and this situation profoundly frustrates me. The police, court clerks, public prosecution clerks, it's inadmissible that in such professions, plus teachers and doctors who issue such sick notes, that they should participate in the process of demoralizing, let me put it in a lofty way, of our nation, and particularly in the demoralizing of my grandchildren. I definitely dislike it. I'm sorry for the lofty note.
I have 2 grandchildren, so this worries me. Right, getting back to your question, sir. Well, the situation is right now at the very same level as it was when it comes to electricity and oil. Well, you said that the inflation was not going to exceed the target. Did you mean 2019 or the entire perspective of the projection, the entire perspective? And in the entire Eurozone, despite all the doubts and concerns that were raised before, I don't think inflation will be a problem in the coming years, especially not in our country. Please note that we have been keeping the same very low inflation level. I mean, core inflation at a radically low level with 5% growth pace. So this is something that's phenomenal. And do you remember when in this room, towards the end of 2017, I was saying, may the moment last. I was saying back then that it was a great moment in the history of Polish finance, and I said, may the moment last. And actually, it has been lasting for a bit already. For a bit, we had thought something was changing. Economic growth might slow down a little bit, but just a little bit, while inflation will be remaining very low. And when I talked to the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, I had been talking to some experts, and some people from my team had been visiting the BIS with me before, and we concluded that the overheating of the economy was not going to be a problem, even though people were predicting it would be a problem, and so on and so on. But actually, our conclusion, especially governors of national banks in the West, in both Americas, they are of the opinion that QE has driven the economy, yes, but it hasn't picked up enough speed, and at one point the easing problem should appear. But actually the European Central Bank already announced that they would be finishing their QE, and in December they actually did finish with it. But please remember that the results of QE are going to still last, to linger. What happens with securities has some ramifications. And if ECB continues or picks up QE again within the next year, we would see no difference at all. So actually, the European Central Bank was trying to help the economic situation actually in our country. What we might be seeing is not really hikes in its interest rates, but discussions, at least discussions, about, well, maybe not lowering these, because that might be risky for some banks, but at least maybe some unconventional methods. But anyway, it's all about what if. What if? These are my what ifs, especially that our situation is really stable. It's one of the highest standings in Europe, very stable, no bubbles that are about to burst. And we, as the Monetary Policy Council, when we were talking about the previous year, we thought maybe we were not boasting or bragging enough about our work. We always say, oh, it's a coincidence or confluence of different factors, it's Germany, it's this, it's that, and we fail to notice our own actions. But actually, maybe some of the things are down to our actually impeccable monetary policy. Maybe it's also thanks to this policy that our economic growth is so stable without any negative consequences for the economy. Of course, this all-around situation is good, and we're pretty lucky, but the more you work, the more you think, the more lucky you get. And there have been a number of temptations. Analysts have been, or were urging us to do this, to do that, but we were always listening and never taking any hasty decisions. So this period in our monetary policy is a good one. So I'm right now bragging, boasting about how we've been doing so far. I hope that the coming year is going to be equally productive. Our discussions so far have been maybe lengthy, maybe heated, maybe because of me, but anyway, our monetary policy has been good. And I think all the analysts, all the independent observers will be hard-pressed to find any errors in judgment or mistakes. Well, what about, well, you, Mr. Governor and professors, the period of our sort of stability? I know what you're asking, because at one point, well, in 2020, do you think we're going to be a stable situation? I would say, even I would risk stating that maybe even till the end of our term, we will remain stable. This whole engine is sort of driving in a different direction. Things have shifted a little bit, and any growth that we see at the level of above of 3% is good for us. And right now we're at 5. So even if our economic growth and its pace falls and inflation rises a little bit, still we're going to say, let the moment last, may the moment last. Of course, there might be a little bit of a light or a little bit of a perspective in the tunnel that's uncertain, that maybe our stability should continue beyond 2019 or even beyond 2020. This would be splendid, because around 2022, of course, Poland will feel the effect of receiving less funds from the European Union. So it would be good towards this period to be sort of strong and healthy, and we're happy that we can help the government, because it's yet another point on the list of our objectives. So helping the government, stabilizing the economy, and sort of creating a safety zone. Well, sir, I have to tell you something that may be of concern. If nothing is happening, there's nothing to write about. But we're pretty happy when nothing special is happening. We, myself and Professor Rzeżyński, we believe that you shouldn't be looking just at inflation. You should be looking at why prices are going up, because what we decide, sort of in terms of our competences and our domain, is the price of lending. So this is what we have in our minds, in our brains. And as long as we are unable to specify why prices are going up, And if we find a reason why, and if this reason is linked to the price of credit, then there is this other element. And, well, the two of us, myself and Professor Żyżyński, we remain very calm, even if we're mentioning some alarming or potentially alarming processes in the economy. We still remain calm because we always think, if we increase the price of credit, will this help? Will this affect electricity, energy, fuel? So we might see the situation. Well, if the governor stopped at what he was saying, but if it turned out that his opinions were contrary to my opinions, which I don't see for the moment, it could happen that someone in our monetary council, alarmed, concerned about the pace of price increase, if they put a motion to increase interest rates, I'm pretty sure that myself and several other members of the MPC, I guess the governor included, would be asking themselves this question: is this the right moment to raise the price of credit? Well, the problem is whether potential increase in prices has its sources in sort of atrophic lending or hypertrophic lending. So then, if there is too much lending, we should try to calm the situation down, maybe increase interest rates. But right now, the raise in prices has its sources in the government's fiscal policy, sort of to drive the economy. But if there is a slight growth of inflation, it's not something that we can stop with our altering interest rates. I'm not sure if you got right what I wanted to tell you. Definitely the Monetary Policy Council is pretty surprised with what's been going on with the recent developments, but we are surprised in a positive way. Well, hey, Mr. Governor, I'm very proud with the fact that our projections had been so spot on. Well, yes, but the prices of energy and oil... No, actually what we have right now, it's something that we were foreseeing before, and we acted adequately. Yes, but when we got back to the NEC model, the way what it indicated about oil prices, and we added electricity prices to the mix, then the model showed us a slight increase in inflation. But actually, right now, the model is showing us that we're even better off than we had thought. But again, this shows you how volatile, how uncertain our projections are, because our projections are as good as our assumptions. Maybe at one point in the future, another Monetary Policy Council might see a negative result because there was something from the outside that was affecting commodity prices.
Next question, please. ISB News. In this situation, I have a question about those non-standard instruments. At which stage of advancement do you have this scenario developed? Because I don't expect any hike, any decrease likewise. Well, I can tell you we've finalized that work, and that development took about 1 year. Well, the staff got the commission from the MPC, has been receiving various materials, They were submitted to the MPC sessions, they were analyzed and discussed and so on. So it took about, well, there were about 4 ups and downs, and at the end of the day we adopted a material which allows us to say that we are 100% prepared to implement any non-standard policy instruments, although it has actually become standard in the West, but what I call non-standard monetary policy which are applied in the West. So everything that corresponds to our market can be applied. Sometimes you say that from 2008, Poland was legally adjusted because of various legal acts and MPC decisions. There were some elements of this. However, no act of law was adopted, and we had to take the trouble to collect it all together, juxtapose it in a coherent way. And the straightforward question to your answer to your question is yes, we are ready. But it's probably, well, let me put it differently. Supposing that the economic conditions, knocking on the wood, on the wood, should collapse radically, and we would be going towards very weak economic growth, 1.2, 1.5, and the future MPC might decide that the interest rate should not be decreased, then something like this could be applied. Well, but there's nothing like this on the horizon, and the MPC is very ardent to keep working and acting, and but since we had no reason to act in a nervous way, we had the time. We took advantage of the good economic conditions. That's when you have to prepare for a worse time, for a worse day, for a rainy day. So in about 3 years' time, don't know how much we still have left on our term. Well, we will prepare a good package for the next MPC, and the entire MPC and the board of the National Bank agree on this. Next question, Ms. Bartyzo, please. Bloomberg News. I'd like to first make the MPC conditions more precise, whose forecast you have presented. The first condition is on inflation. I've been talking to all the MPC members, and notwithstanding what has been said generally, I know that you, gentlemen, as well as Madam Ancyparovich, understand the inflationary target in slightly different ways. So when you're talking about the inflationary target, which will not be achieved by the inflation by the way of 2020, do you mean 2.5 or 3.5? It will not be achieved this year, and next year I hope that it will also not be achieved. Is it 2.5? Yes, it's 2.5%. So we're not talking. No. Mind you, our inflationary target, notwithstanding any statements of MPC members who might have a slip of the tongue, has been unchanged. It hasn't been changed since the beginning of our term, and it's 2.5 without any fluctuations up or down. I mean, it also saying that any fluctuation up or down is treated in the same way. So we're talking about 2.5%. There are some central banks who have an exact target. There are such who don't have it, and there are such who have a specific target plus the band, and we have the specific one plus band. Right now we are below the band. Yes, I know that. So, in the minutes after the December meeting, you wrote that the GDP might be lowered towards the level of the second semester of 2017, the rate of growth. So that would be way below 4%. Yes, it could. Is that the kind of weakening we're talking about in the situation this year? So the GDP would also be better than in the November projection. Yes, but we meant the lowering of the GDP growth rate below 5, and in the recent quarters we've had around 5. So all the ratios have been improved, and it's not at each other's expense. So it's the inflation is lower and the GDP growth is higher. MPC members are reluctant to comment on whatever is happening in the markets. However, after the recent PMI reading, the press has shown for the first time for the past 3 years that there has been an expectation of decreasing the interest rates. Well, I wanted to ask you, because we've been saying that the current level is optimum. I'd like to ask, abstracting from the stability of the banking system, do you see any room for lowering interest rates in Poland? No, we are happy to comment on any developments. The only thing that we are reluctant to comment on is the forecast of FX rates. But for the last year, we can say that despite the turmoil in the financial markets, trade wars, the FX rates of the sterling dollar, I mean the FX rate of the PLN has been quite constant. That's quite surprising. And mind you, if you take a look at the Polish and global media, the radical. It was expected that the radical increase in the U.S. GDP it would drain the other countries in such a way as it has occurred in a disastrous way in Latin America and Brazil and so on, and not in Poland. Some of the capital has flown out, but it's also flowing in because the situation in Poland is so good that capital is finding very good conditions here. So we are also commenting on PMI. Today we have had the discussion on PMI, but we as the National Bank of Poland are obligated to maintain due diligence, and other than PMI, we also look into 3 other ratios, and they don't point to any worrying elements. But I was asking about the reduction in interest rates and the space for it. There is no discussion about this. There is one MPC member who's happy to think about it, and he said that the first change would be a downward change when hardly anyone expected that, but there is also hardly any reason to decrease them given the good economic conditions. No, I mean the growth rate. No, I mean the economic cycle. Will it be the first cycle ever without any movements in the interest rates, or it might be one without any hike with some decrease? Well, I'd like to remind you that given our stable GDP growth, we've also been observing in our partners in Germany, among others, we've been observing a slight weakening. So if that weakening should continue in half a year or so, and since our economy is very strongly linked to the EU economy, especially the German one, so we are connected to the technological channels, then you would have to trigger the economic growth here so that the internal market would also be inspired. Then you should probably find space for lowering the price of credit, and then you might contemplate lowering the interest rates. But as the governor has said, you can't see any such prospects for the upcoming half year. When we were just potentially contemplating, we commissioned a couple of expert works about how it would impact the activity, the business of banks, particularly cooperative banks. And there were some experts' works that showed very weak scenarios, sometimes very much better, but it's purely theoretical. Definitely, stable interest rates serve their purpose to the Polish economy. I know it's kind of boring, but nothing shows that it might change over the next 5 years. It's going to be difficult for me to persuade anyone to lower the interest rates, because back in my day, I was persuaded about this by the analysis prepared by Paul Samuelson, a Nobel Prize winner, who used such a comparison in his textbooks. He says that the interest rate policy is like fastening a rope to a horse's tail. You can brake, but it's hard to push. But what I would like to tell you what the situation is about. We have to remember that it's still about the price of loans, the price of credit. If we have a situation where there is some space for investing and there are no private funds and the profit rates are not particularly high, then you might consider whether that bag should not be opened and the credit prices could be lowered. But in my opinion, this situation can only occur very infrequently, and it's not only for pushing the economy forward. Rather than that, it's for opening its perspectives when it's perceptible that there is a pressure towards investments and there's a lack of funds. That's not our situation. That's not our case. As you know, the liquidity has decreased. It's not so huge. Well, to finalize it, we did not give in to the pressure to lower the prices excessively as in the west of Europe, so there is still a potential to lowering them. In the west they have 0, 1 or 0.5. There have no space for this. We could lower them if necessary. Okay, I know that. I realize that. There have been several questions also. If I might just ask another one. There's been a lot of interest in what Poland might do as part of those non-standard instruments, because we've never done it. Yes, you've never done it, and you are presenting it in such a way as though it was obvious. But I'd like to learn whether we can get to know the list, a list of such measures to be potentially taken by the National Bank of Poland, or might we be calling a Polish way of doing QE? Well, we might prepare a presentation or a seminar for journalists. These are the tools applied in Western Europe, adjusted to the Polish conditions, because some of them might not be put in place. We don't have such different securities with various maturities. We don't have such a capital or equity market, so these are much easier things. Okay, but it would be nice if we could learn them from in a greater detail. Yes, we will talk about our this and organize it. But mind you that there are no such prospects for this to ever take place. But as you can see, many things happen by surprise. Yes, the world is more and more unpredictable. I have a question about stability.
You have been often stressing how important stability was, also from the point of view how investors perceive Poland. So my question is, haven't you noticed something, around you personally, that might be the reason that would lead to some negative consequences for credibility of the National Bank of Poland, especially that in the last month, quite a lot has been said in the media about the NBP's salary policy. Well, actually, no one outside of Poland is bothered about such rumors. Just like if something happens in the Bundesbank in Germany, if there are rumors of this nature, no one cares about them outside of Germany. So I might be tempted to say something pretty spiteful, but I like you. You are pretty well. We've known one another for quite a long time, but if someone took your what you write and what you report seriously, one might think that the governor of the NBP is trying to avoid responsibility surrounding a corruption scandal or something, but actually no one has reacted to this outside of our country. The prices everything has been stable, and since this great issue has been so widely discussed, no one actually has asked me. And then, of course, people started talking about tenders, then now they are talking about salaries and payroll and stuff like that. some people will worried about assistance to the governor of the NBP, but actually such a position has never existed in this country. Well, anyway, such rumors or such allegations, they are something that no one outside of this country cares about. You are halfway through your term. No, not myself. I myself am. Well, do you see anything that might sort of prevent you from finishing your term? Well, I'm thinking about some, I don't know, maybe natural disasters. I don't think we're threatened by a tsunami. We are hardly threatened by anything like that. You live in the world of media, madam. Well, myself as well. I, of course, follow what the media reports, and this is our habit. This is what we do. But actually, what is reported in the media is quite distant from reality. Nothing has been going on all over the National Bank of Poland. Everything is right. We are not subject to any audit from the Supreme Auditing Chamber. I mean, if there is an audit, it happens every single year. And auditors from the Supreme Auditing Chamber or Auditing Office, they always come here on a regular basis once a year. And there's always some recommendations they give us, and it always happens. It's like painting the bridge. Once you finish painting it, you have to go back to the beginning. But there's nothing sinister going on. Every year we are being audited. And also one of the big four auditing companies, they audit us. Well, we have hundreds of people working here, so many departments. So you don't feel like you might have to, resign or something, step down? Why has it occurred to you? Are you bored with me? Well, there's a lot of pressure from the opposition. The opposition, recently, there have been some doubts, concerns. Well, not only the opposition, but recently there have been some doubts as to, well, also coming from the political party that you are in line with or aligned with. How do you know who I'm aligned with? Well, people have been saying, well, the NBP is sort of keeping out of the world of politics. No politics. Let me just say, in 1992, the governor of the Polish National Bank of Poland was member of the Christian National Party that I was the leader, or had been the leader of. But well, anyway, right now I've been working, or I work at the National Bank of Poland, and we are not a political organization. I could be pretty mean to you, especially that some of the reports and some of the allegations that you're making in your reports. Well, honestly, let me tell you, I never look who people are affiliated with or where their sympathies are. If someone is competent in their work, this is the person that I stick to. And at the NBP, we have people with all sorts of opinions, all sorts of views. Even one person revealed himself as an anarchist, a leftist anarchist. But well, if they are competent and doing their work well and responsibly, we have all sorts of people or all sorts of views represented here. No one really cares about it. No one wonders about people religious beliefs or whether they are coming to work on a bicycle or by bus or whatever. For dozens of years, even during the communist times, the National Bank of Poland has always been different about like this. Also, we have people here representing the opposition party, or sons and daughters and spouses of politicians, also including politicians from the opposite party. But there might be some person who is totally apolitical, but they're not competent or they are not doing their job, and then they have no place here. So to me, this is what's important. Also, we really pay attention to people's merits. We pay them well, but we expect a lot from them, and well, that's it. Andrzej Wierwiński, Polsat News. I would like to ask about what Jarosław Gowin said and about how that not informing about salaries of executives, that it's cowardly. Also, one politician from the Law and Justice Party said that they were going to vote for a motion by the opposition party about disclosing salaries and remuneration, and some people think they still don't know some facts. Maybe they haven't been watching closely enough. Well, so how do you comment on this? People, important prominent politicians from the Law and Justice Party. Well, I don't follow the news always that closely and everything that everyone says, but when Mr. Gowin said that some things are cowardly, I would say to this person who said that, please think twice before you say anything about the National Bank of Poland, because the National Bank of Poland and the government are completely independent and distinct institutions. So representatives of the National Bank of Poland refrain from commenting what the government is doing, like, for example, the education system reform, even though all of us are sometimes teachers or lecturers, but we never publicly talk about, policy in the area of education that is conducted by the government. Hence, the minister who said those words that you had quoted should also stop commenting on the NBP, because that person has no idea what they're talking about. Thank you. We've exhausted our time. Well, I think we should allow one more question. Two questions? Well, Krzysztof Berenda, RMF Radio. Well, there was another question that I never answered, sir. I'm referring to this person from Polsat News. Of course, this law about disclosing remuneration levels and salaries at the NBP, I will sign it, but it has to be there. But actually, it could take one click of a button to reveal all the salaries of NBP's executives, even all the 3,000 employees, but right now it would be unlawful or illegal. We need this law for anyone to sign it. If anyone were to accept it or to sign it, it has to be there. But actually nowhere will you find full disclosure of, payroll numbers. And sometimes one professor may earn 10 times more than another professor. And that might be strange to some people, but it's not disclosed. In Sweden, for example, everyone discloses everything. But in no other central bank do we have that situation. In all, and of course always, in all banks, governors earn more than the president or the prime minister of that given country. We are the bank, the ultimate bank of all banks. So actually the way we are remunerated is something that is inspired by the banking system rather than the public service area, even though I guess all of us would like to be the president or the prime minister. It would be very rewarding indeed. And definitely, we at the NBP, we have to compete for the great talent, for top talent among our employees. So everything that's been going on is normal. There's nothing special about it. There are two female executives that the media has been picking on specifically. I don't know, because maybe of the way they look, but all these things, all these allegations are sexist and heinous, and it has an impact on their families, daughters and sons and spouses. Their kids go to school, for example. So people are just repeating some brass harsh comments, especially led and instigated by a paper that is always trying to be a beacon of equal treatment. And now they are saying it's wrong, that this or that female executive earns as much as any male executive. In our case, executives and directors are, well, half of them are females.
As much as men. It doesn't matter. Okay, pass that law. We can prepare that law together, and before the end of the year, you're going to have everything. If I do it on my own, then my GDPR office is going to step in, and they say that what I disclosed this morning was absolutely inadmissible, and that was infringement of the rules. But my legal department holds a different opinion. So GDPR, well, for instance, in kindergartens, children are called John K. It's not clear to me. Well, I can launch that as per the tax return. I mean, it contains all sorts of things, like, for instance, the former governor Belka. I had no time to consult it or comment on this. In his remuneration, there was also his remuneration included what was it, like a jubilee bonus. Well, but that's the tax return. That was the last year of his service of Mr. Belka, Ms. Gronkiewicz-Waltz. I didn't realize it was that, because it's different money. So I just provided you with everything, maximum. None of the bank governors, well, no one ever at the bank gave you so much as myself. Even the average remuneration of directors. The bank staff and executives are unhappy with this, but I did. Well, Madam Martyna Wojciechowska, and she's subject to the harassment. I don't know for what reason, perhaps because she has been connected with Law and Justice Party. She's one of the 14 directors who have a similar remuneration level. 14 directors, and as per the total revenue, she's one of 12. So pass that law. I mean, press on the MPs, and they're going to do it. Law and Justice said they favored it. Civic Platform said they favor it. Well, is it going to be good for the bank? Awful, awful. It's going to be awful. It's going to hamper the recruitment. There are some departments who have 350 people, and there are some departments who have 10 people on board. So such divergence is natural. There's going to be pressure on leveling off that remuneration level. But if you want to do it, or some politicians do, be my guest. I obey every law to the latest dot. I abide by every law. So if it also applies to cleaning ladies, I mean, these are outsourced services, but I could also do it. I disclosed my own remuneration without any limitations. Unfortunately, I also disclosed that of Mr. Belka and Ms. Gronkiewicz-Waltz. Remember, back at that time, her remuneration, that was 40 times the national average. Now mine and Mr. Belka's is much less so. I mean, from the first part of Mr. Balcerowicz's term, that would be tremendous. Well, I didn't want to dig into that data. I mean, just wanted, if you want to drill in, I might be providing you this, but you have to defend it if I'm attacked because of GDPR. So Berenda, RMF, one briefer. We have about the energy prices. We have the energy price law. It's imprecise. There are no regulations. Also from the ERO, who don't know what to do. How will the MPC also while in the decision-making process, how will they take those prices into account? Because we have this mechanism that they're going to be higher than reversely adjusted. We have the model investigation, price investigation model in such a way that they're looked into at the consumers directly. And if something is treated in a different way, but realistically the prices go up, we'll take that into account. We've been observing the discussion, but the government has said that those prices will not go up, definitely, and we trust our government. Notwithstanding our views, we trust every Polish government, especially in the case of the National Bank of Poland, which enjoys the greatest prestige, also under a communist rule, even though it was called differently, because we are apolitical. If you want, I might invite 200 people here who had some ideological connection with civic platform, and to the next meeting I might invite 200 people who had some family or other connections with the United Left, and then 200 people from another party. But what's the point? I mean, those people just go home and watch TVN or TVP Info. I don't care. Okay, a brief question, because this question has been lingering in the media space. So could we ask you for a clear declaration? Will you resign before the end of the term? Okay. There's one answer I might say. When I come back from Radom, I might consider that. Thank you very much. We've definitely won. Thank you very much for the meeting. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we have to finish now. Not Marek H., it's Marek Szanowski. He's going to leave the arrest this month, and he will be definitely happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.